another organization somewhere in the world that likes to help entrepreneurs. And we have helped them help entrepreneurs. We've taught them how to run accelerators or beefed up their accelerator. And then Africa Eats, let's go back here for a second. We have two spinoffs. One is the Angel Accelerator. So now I'm running a program that teaches people how to be angel investors. I'm running the second version of that right now. We just started 6 hours ago. And there's two of these running at the moment. There's one running in Africa by the Africa Venture Philanthropy Alliance. And there's one running in the US by Fledge. Both started today. They run for the next 12 weeks. Basically, we need more angels. Every city you're in needs more angels. And so we're going to make more angels with a training program. And we're calling it an accelerator because that's what it is. And then the other spinoff is Africa Eats. You'll hear a bit about that as we go through the tips and tricks. And lastly, I do run a nonprofit because I do work in Africa, and that's just what people do. But my nonprofit's really strange. Our primary goal is to make impact investments. So we take philanthropy. We take that from donor advised funds and family foundations and grants, and we make impact investments with them. Because a lot of, we had someone earlier say, I'm from a foundation, we're still learning. Yeah, we just make it easy. We take all the burden off their hands. All right, so you saw that map. Africa Eats is a new holding company. It's about 9 months old. It's based in Mauritius, and it is an investment company. We own investments. We own minority stakes in 27 companies across the African continent. All of them are graduates of the Fledge program somewhere. They all came to Fledge programs in one of those cities on that map. They're all run by native Africans, and they're all doing something in food and ag. That's what they have in common. And the reason we started the holding company is because they're all trying to grow, and growth is hard. Growth requires capital, growth requires guidance, growth requires a whole lot of stuff. And in looking at how to best grow these companies, it seemed like the best model was to do it in a tighter model and a tighter structure than the typical venture capital fund. So this is a holding company, not a venture capital fund. We intend to own these companies forever, which is not the normal thing to do. And we intend to take the holding company and make it a public company in an African exchange, hopefully next year, and then be a public company in London as soon as we can, 26, 27, 28, well within 10 years. Now, the reason why it's so hard to invest in startups, so hard to invest in early companies, is because what you read about when you hear about new companies, you read about this story here. It's in the movies, it's in the newspapers, in the magazine, in the podcasts. It always sounds like this. It always sounds like somebody had an idea, and out of nowhere, they just turned it into a company, and the next thing you know, it was a success. And so that's, whether that's Jumia or whether that's Facebook or Google or Apple or whatnot, that's the story that's told, and it's false. It's never happened. That has never happened in the history of mankind. What happens, it always looks like this. It's a mess. What really happens is somebody has an idea and they try and bring it to market and it doesn't work. And so they find a workaround, and then that doesn't work. And then they find something else and that doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and that doesn't work. And if they make it through that process, if enough of these things that don't work if those hurdles get knocked down, then they pop out at the top of this and it looks like a success. That's really what happens. That's why it takes 10, 15, 20 years to get from an idea to a successful company, right? A real successful company. Then the other reality is that most new companies fail. We know the statistics in the United States. Half of all companies are gone after 3 years. We don't actually know what happens to them, but we just assume that most of them fail. So within 3 years, half of all new companies are gone. And it's a lot of companies. In the rest of the world, it's probably the same, if not worse. And so what really happens is something like this. Same exact chart, just to be clear, except a few too many of the things go wrong in a row, and the company runs out of money and it fails. Ultimately, that's the story you always hear. They ran out of money, but they ran out of money because they didn't sell enough product, because they didn't have the right product, because they made a strategic decision that was incorrect a long time back, and they wind up failing. So what's this look like in real life for angels and VCs? So a successful portfolio for an angel or a VC right? It doesn't matter. The actual success rate is the same between the two styles of investing, right? Angels being their own money, VCs being other people's money. So if you see a successful portfolio from venture capitalists, what happens is that 1 out of 10 times they get what they're really looking for, which is a gigantic hit. And 2 out of 10 times they feel bad because it wasn't a gigantic hit. It was only just a mediocre hit, right? Which is, 5 times their money back, but that's just not considered great. And three or four times they get just their money back. And the reason why it's exactly their money back or close to it is the structure of a typical VC investment. And then 4 times or so out of 10, they get completely wrong, and the whole investment goes to nothing. So what you should take away from this is not that the big returns are possible out there. What you should take away with this is that even the VCs, even the California VCs who get the best deal flow in the world, and the New York VCs who get the next best deal flow in the world, and the London VCs who get the third best deal flow in the world, and so on, they're still wrong 7 out of 10 times. I'm going to pause there for a second. The best deal flow in the world leads to an outcome where they're wrong 7 out of 10 times, because they didn't expect these to fail. They expect every one of these 10 investments to be a big success, right? Or at least have a chance to be a big success. And they're wrong 7 out of 10 times. They're only right 3 in 10. It's not a very good average, but that's the successful VCs. The unsuccessful VCs are wrong even more. They're wrong 8 out of 10 times or 9 out of 10 times, and they lose money. And the vast majority of VCs actually lose money. Half of all VCs lose money for their investors. And a very large percentage of angels lose money, not because they're making bad decisions, because they're not doing enough investments. It's a numbers thing. You have to put a lot of checks at play. You have to have a large portfolio to have a chance of success. Now, there's a couple structures that are used to go and invest in early companies. In the African continent, the number one way to do that is debt. So I have this diagram system I use to teach structures, and they all start with it's not to scale here, a chunk of money handed to the company from the investor. This gray line is the company's revenues. Hopefully they're growing. If they're not, it's a bad investment. You find that out in hindsight. And then what's promised in a debt, right? Everyone should know this. What's promised in the investment is that the company will pay back the investor a fixed amount of money for a certain amount of time, right? And this should stack up to be higher than that by a little bit. And the problem with debt, the reason why it's not used in the US and in Europe for startups is because it doesn't work. And if you do this enough in Africa, if you talk to enough debt investors in Africa, you'll find out it doesn't really work there either. And the reason is really simple. If you have a fixed amount of money that you're expecting to get paid back from a company that's expected to grow a lot with this money, they can't afford the first payments. It's as simple as that. And so the solution that we have is, well, we just push out the payments. We just give them a honeymoon. Well, either you just ignore the first few payments altogether and stack them on the end, or we'll say it's interest only for a while, or we'll do a whole bunch of things to try and make this work out. In the end, it doesn't work out. It does work for growth stage companies, and it does work in certain areas, but in general, for all those masses of companies out there that are looking for your money to grow, to get from early sales to be a real company, it doesn't work. And even if it did, you're not making enough money. You're actually better off just buying government bonds. The risk is lower, and the return is as good as debt. So the normal way to invest in startups, what that 10x was talking about, is equity. The California way to invest in startups is equity. And the terms for that, if you look at that in this diagram, are really weird. Right? You wouldn't think that anyone would do this, but for historical reasons, this is the norm. So the investors hand money over to the company, and the company promises them nothing. Nothing. No cash flows. Dividends are in the paperwork, but they're never going to get paid. Basically, the company promises them nothing. There's a unwritten wink and handshake and whatnot that says sometime in the future, this company is going to get purchased, going to get acquired by someone else. When that happens, you're going to get your return investor. You're going to get your 5, 10, 20x return, because that new buyer is going to pay a huge amount of money because the revenues of the company go up. The value of the company's gone up. Now, as an investor, this is a strange thing to do because you don't have any You have no written contract that says when this is going to happen. You have no idea if it's going to happen. And most of the time, as I just showed you, it doesn't happen. So usually what you're doing is you're doing a grant, but you find out it's a grant 3 or 4 or 10 years later. You found out that, in fact, you gave them money with no expectation of return. And for all you guys who are philanthropists out there, you call that a grant. But sometimes it works, and when it works well. And so that's the norm. There is a third choice out there. It's obscure. It's not known. It's not well talked about, and it's not used very often. But there's a third choice. Fledge is the one of the biggest users of this in the world, but the biggest advocates of this. It's called revenue-based investing. It comes in a variety of forms. My last Songkop talk went much deeper on that. I can go through the details. I'm not going to do that today. But basically, the way it works is that, again, you hand over some money as an investor to a company. And what they promise in return is a fixed percentage of their revenue, single-digit number, something small and affordable. And instead of a fixed amount of time, they promise you a fixed amount of money. And the amount of money, I don't know if it's not on the next slide here, the amount of money is often between 1.5 and 2 times. So you give them, let's say, $50,000 for them to grow, and you share 5% of their revenues. And so when they've earned $500,000, they've given you back $100,000. If I get my numbers right, more or less. They win because they get to grow. You win because you get paid back with a nice multiple. Everybody's happy. And it keeps the alignment really well between the company and the investor, because everybody just wants more revenue. Who doesn't want more revenue? Everybody likes more revenue. Again, I did the talk, my recording of the talk from the last Songkop Global is on this website. So you can just Google Luni, California Capitalism, it'll find it for you. And I literally wrote the book on the topic. So this is the only book I know of in the world on revenue-based finance. And it's short, it's sweet, it's on Amazon. It'll teach you everything else that this talk won't do. Eric, are you here?
Yes, yes, thanks, Luni. And
let me go back and let you do your bio. So that was slide 18. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would just do a sort of very brief bio of myself. So I'm an investor and entrepreneur, and I've been primarily involved in building companies and communities in Africa over the last 2 decades, primarily in the ISP industry. So I built a couple of ISPs between 1998 and 2008, ISP associations, and we created this project called the African Internet Exchange System, which connects countries and operators on the continent, and it's become an African Union project. I then went on to help build some of the subsea cables in Africa, including teams in Kenya, NCBC in Ghana, and then Main One in Nigeria, which is sort of the big subsea cables that connect Africa to the rest of the world, using a model I developed called the open access model together with a few colleagues. And then I sort of dovetailed into angel investing accidentally, actually, in 2013 by starting with setting up an angel group called Angel Africa List, and then got into starting an event that brings angels and entrepreneurs together called Angel Fair Africa. And last year, we launched our first virtual accelerator, which is the Africa Virtual Accelerator. And I do all this under our company, Chanzo Capital. So Chanzo Capital is a venture capital firm domiciled in Mauritius. We have offices in Accra, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. We've so far invested in 12 portfolio companies and our Kings startup fund, which is sort of a fund that did very early stage investing in a total of 16 companies. 4 have gone bust and 12 are still running. As Luni said in the other chat, you lose some, you win some, but you just have to win enough to keep going. So that's my background. I've done quite a few authorships and about 4 books. Similar to Luni, who just told you the book he just wrote. My last book is The Kings of Africa's Digital Economy, which is focused on the countries that are leading the digital economy in Africa. So Luni, I guess we'll go back to that slide, which actually, is the slide. Oh, okay. Then, so these are the portfolio companies in the King Startup Fund. So Haptel is in Ghana. Haptel is an e-commerce platform similar to Jumia. The only difference is that we don't keep inventory, and we basically, the model is to bring all these mom and pop shops online. So we give them an inventory management system, we give them a small ERP, we give them a payment system, and then we also do fulfillment using third parties. So that's the platform that Haptel is built. Hotel Online is similar in the sense that Hotel Online is focused on bringing 2-3 star hotels that are mostly offline online. So we give them the tools that they need to be able to bring their hotels online. And as you travel across Africa, you see a lot of interest in nice 2-3 star hotels, but they're not like the big chains that have sort of all the software and the architecture to go online. So we give them we have a SaaS platform that allows them to quickly come online, and then we essentially give them those tools, but also, do a lot of marketing and drive traffic to their facilities. And then we get a transaction, we get a fee of those transactions. FinAccess is also
don't do them all, Eric. Just pick
okay.
one
Yeah.
more.
So I think those two will be fine and give sort of a rough idea of my portfolio. And then we can jump to this slide, which is sort of on the publishing side. So I wrote this book essentially to give sort of an idea of the countries that are really leading the digital economy in Africa, in the sense of the countries to pay attention to, but that doesn't sort of necessarily exclude all the other markets. So there's quite a bit of activity. For example, last year, Egypt was among the 5 top countries that got most investments in Africa, and Ivory Coast didn't make that list. Ivory Coast was somebody on the 7th or the 8th, and then the other countries like Senegal, Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia. So there are a few other markets that are becoming very interesting. So it's good to sort of look widely around the continent. So that's what these books try to tell you, and that's the URL. So if you want to read some more, you can just jump to it. Now, in terms of finding deals, so you may ask, okay, so I know the countries, I know a few countries that I can find deals, but where do I go online to find these deals? And so we want to give you 2 examples. The first is VC for Africa. So I helped start VC for Africa based out of Amsterdam by Ben White and Bill Zimmerman. And actually, this is a very interesting platform. What they do is that they pre-vet these companies and then put them online. And then you join as a member. And actually, what they do is that they bring you constant deal flow. So I think every week you get new companies coming on the platform. So it makes it easy for you to look at these companies, review them, and if you want to invest in them, they have an online process. But generally, my advice is that don't invest in Africa until you've been on the continent, and don't invest in an entrepreneur until you've met them. I think that physical contact is important, and having the ability to feel them is also very important. Having said that, in developed markets like the US, and Europe, a lot of people do invest in online because there's you have a good ability of getting data and information and being able to size an opportunity without necessarily seeing the entrepreneur, which raises the question that now that we have COVID and, there's not a lot of traveling, how are we doing deals?
I got to jump in and dissent, Eric, because I made probably 20 investments in Africa before I ever stepped foot on the continent. And I go to VC for Africa every year, find great entrepreneurs. The way that, since I run an accelerator, I get to write them small checks and then meet them in person after that. But I'm writing checks to them before I've met them.
Well, good. That's a good example that it works in that regard. So the second example is let's go to the next slide. It's our own event. So we have an event called Angel Fair Africa. I think I mentioned in my bio. And what we do with Angel Fair Africa is that we essentially curate about 10 to 20 entrepreneurs from around the continent, working with the incubators, accelerators, co-working with all the innovation hotspots, right? And then we select a country. So last year we were supposed to do Senegal, but we did it virtually because of COVID. And then basically we also invite investors who are interested in investing in these entrepreneurs or investing in these countries. And then we stage an event. So it's an invite-only event that essentially brings about a total, on average, about 100 people. So there's normally about 10 to 20 entrepreneurs in the room, and then there are about 40 to 50 investors. Then there are about 20 to 30 ecosystem players, incubator, accelerator, support partners. Last year we had an all female entrepreneur panel. We also been pushing a lot of female investors. We had our own female investor panel last year. This year we do it normally in November. We're still looking at whether we can do a physical event or we'll do another virtual event. But it's one way for you to sort of get curated deal flow by coming to this event and meeting other investors, but also meeting entrepreneurs. And yes, last year we did our first event fully online. We haven't had any investment from that deal yet, but the previous events have resulted in about $23 million worth of investment. So we've done it in South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Ivory Coast, and Tanzania. So I'll turn it back to Luni now on the screening criteria. So, now
we're going to go through the next few minutes here. We're going to talk about how we do things and how we do things differently. So kind of go through the flow here. So first and foremost, as an investor, you get deal flow, whether you get it from an event or you get it from VC for Africa, or you just get it word of mouth. At some point, you're going to get a bunch of companies that come through. So Eric, what do you use? Like, explain team, opportunity, and scale. What do these three mean to you as the way to pick your companies?
Right. So for me, when I'm looking at a company, the first thing I'm looking at is top priority is the team, or the founder, or the founding team, or the co-founders. Sometimes it's a single person, it's a team. And for me, that's very important to understand that the entrepreneurs have a vision and to kind of figure out whether they can achieve that vision. And that vision presents the opportunity that I'm looking at, right? So what is the opportunity here? How big is the market? And tied to that is the ability to scale that opportunity across Africa or globally. And that speaks to the fact that what I'm looking for really is in an entrepreneur, in an early stage venture, is what I call execution risk. So I'm trying to figure out what is execution risk here based on the team's ability, the opportunity we have, and the ability to scale. So those are the three critical things that I look for when I'm looking at the deal in the first instance.
Yeah, and so yours is the normal one: team, opportunity, scale, or opportunity, team, scale. Like you corner any VC, and that's what they're going to tell you, or they're going to tell you it's team, 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 and you have to ask the follow up to get the rest of them.
Right.
Mine, of course, starts with team as well, because if you don't have the right team, you're investing in the wrong thing. Right, the odds of failure go way up. But my number two is impact, because I'm an impact investor, and I'm a market rate impact investor, not a concessionary philanthropic investor. I want the same returns that Eric wants, but I want the impact to be the biggest possible. So one thing that's different about our two work is, first and foremost, my tool for investing is an accelerator, which means I get 700-800 opportunities at once. Literally, like, here's the top of, this is some old slides of mine. Here's the top of the list, and there's 800 more to look at. And I'm going to choose 7 at a time, because that's just the model we use. And so we're going to pick the ones that have great teams, and then we're going to pick the ones that have the 7 biggest impacts, with one more criteria underneath that, which is more or less what you call execution risk. But really, it boils down for us to, what are the odds that this one's going to succeed? Or just to be clear, we don't know what's going to succeed. No investor is good at picking success. We know what's going to fail. We know it's a high chance of failure. So we screen out the failures. We screen out the ones that are just too risky, right? Based on a lot of factors. All right, the next step you do once you've gotten your short list is you do due diligence on them. So Eric, once again, what are you looking at?
So the first thing I'm looking for in due diligence is character, right? I want to see that this person is honest, this team is honest, they are hardworking. Those sort of soft skills, for me, those things are very, very important when I'm doing diligence, because they really determine the longevity of the relationship. And one of the things that's important with investing, most angel investors, when you invest in a company, it's almost like you're going into a marriage. It's a marathon. It's going to take many years before you get your return. So I think Luni made the point, but I want to emphasize again that you should only invest capital that at a minimum you can wait for 10 years or more to get the return. So these are 10-year cycles. And so you need to also size the person you're going to be dealing with for 10 years. What is this person's character trait like? For me, that's very important. I also, in due diligence, look for execution. So what have they done so far? Sometimes you get entrepreneurs who can say, get a great opportunity but have they executed something? Have they had at least do something about it? So for me, that is them having skin in the game. You'll get some entrepreneurs who can paint you a great picture and everything and say, but I'm waiting for your money to just take the first step. For me, that says something about execution. And then the third thing is, are they good at building relationships? Fundamentally, business is all about relationships, right? If you can strike the next big deal, it's about being able to establish a relationship. So I look for that, and you'll see that these elements that I put out there are kind of undercurrents. And for me, those undercurrents are really important to determining the success of the business. So these are the underlying things that I look for when I'm diligencing a deal.
Okay. And mine's similar, but I'm going to use totally different words and a different framework for it. So again, I have the luxury of being able to do, I'll do 30 interviews in 2 weeks. So I'll get that list of 800 down to 30 or 40. I'll just send a lot of text-based questions to people and get back the responses. And it's really obvious when you do it in this style that there are some that are just great and some that are good and some that are not. Just to be generous to the knots. There's another word we use. Well, I won't say that on the recorded version here. But there's a bunch that are great. They pass all the screening criteria. They look really great. And then the next thing we have to figure out is what's their flaw. The normal path for VCs and angels is to look for the flaws, look for the yellow flags and the red flags, and then skip those because they're flawed, because there's another one coming that's better. But I run an accelerator, and so our default is, yes, we want to help you. We would love to help all 800 companies. We don't have the time or the money to do that. So we're going to only help 7 at a time, but they're all flawed. So this is the due diligence checklist up here. Something's wrong. There's something on that list that they would not pass, and they would not get a VC or an angel investment because of it. And so the number 3 thing on my list is, can we fix it? So I'm really excited when I can see the flaw. It's usually when you do this enough times. I've been doing this for 9 years. They just pop out. They're glaringly obvious. You give me a pitch deck, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. And the question I'll have then is, okay, I get 2 months to fix these problems. Can I fix it? And part of that will be in terms of character. When we're doing the interviews, is this person someone who listens to feedback? And if they're not, if they're defensive every time I'm trying to give them feedback on the interview call, then that's their flaw, and that's not good. That's not fixable. Whereas if the flaw is they're running a company with $50,000 or $100,000 in revenue, or U.S. equivalent of revenue, but they don't know how to build a financial model, well, I can teach them how to build a financial model. I can teach them how to do a pitch deck. I can teach them how to tell a story if their pitch deck is just terrible, but they have a company or a great idea. So that's the kind of things we look for that are fixable.
And if I may add to that, Luni, the point that we're trying to make here is that when you do early stage investing, it's not just about writing checks. So you must also be ready to commit some time and your own resources to doing some of this stuff. Sometimes you can outsource some of this stuff, but sometimes it's important for you to be involved, which is why it's also important that when you want to do early stage investing, you want to invest in an area that you have some prior experience or expertise in, because you can have a better judgment of these things when you're doing diligence.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've ignored that advice too, and I'm happy ignoring that one. We'll dissent on a few things. We do things slightly differently, which is why they paired us up here. Right. So I mentioned yellow and red flags. So Eric, what are some of the things that pop out that you just make you want to scream and run away?
Based on my experience of some of my companies that have failed, the first thing is to be tech focused. So two of my investments that failed because the entrepreneurs had built really cool technology, but they had no idea how to get it to the market, how to get people to use it. And so I kind of try to look for entrepreneurs that have a better understanding of how to get users. Sometimes you may have a tech focused founder, so he becomes a CTO, but I want to then help him find a CEO who is somebody who can get the product to market, right? And this is where sometimes having a co-founder is important, and vice versa. Sometimes you may have somebody who is very good CEO, has got a great idea, but then you can help him find somebody who can develop a product. Sometimes you find out somebody who can do both, and that is great. But even that also, you have to build a team around the person. So one of the things that for me, though I'm a tech investor, is not to be so fixated on the tech, but try to figure out how you apply the technology to the problem you're solving and being able to get users. And the second thing is markets. A lot of time, an entrepreneur would say, "Oh, I'm building something that looks like Facebook, and because Facebook is worth $50 billion, yeah, our valuation is, 50 billion as well because we become the next Facebook." And the flaw in that is that you are estimating the market wrongly, because you are probably starting from Accra. So I want you to be able to tell me the immediate market that you can capture. Yes, you want to become the big Facebook in the future, but what is the immediate market? And how can you get into that market? And how can you start getting revenue? So even though you paid me a big future picture, I want you to extrapolate back and tell me how you're going to start small and grow to become that big entity. And sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs struggle from that. That tells me immediately that that raised a red flag for me in some instances. And
Yeah.
then obviously in this game you have to sell, right? But sometimes you need to watch out for entrepreneurs who oversell. Um, and part of it also is the yes, you need to do some level of selling, but you need to be able to substantiate to some extent, your ability to sell. So for example, for me, if you tell me, hey, I can grow this company to 20x in 1 week or in 3 months, then I want to see, have you done that before? What is the probability that you could be able to do it, right? So watch out for entrepreneurs who oversell. And for me, that can be a yellow flag in some instances.
Great. Again, we're gonna have totally different views here. I have some pet peeves. Marketing speak is one of my pet peeves. When I get a pitch, either just the opening email and it's just full of marketing speak or buzzword soup. Somebody wants me to invest in a cloud-based app that does AI on a blockchain. Literally, I like to respond to email, but I'm just going to ignore that email. Or marketing speak comes in more subtle versions. It just looks like that person thinks they need to speak like an MBA, right? And there's a anecdote that goes around in the California VC circles, which is the value of a company is $1 million per developer minus $1 million per MBA. Like being an MBA and speaking like that is not a positive for startups. I don't think that's quite true in terms of education. But if you can't explain what you're doing in simple terms, it just turns me off and makes me want to just run away. I put team on here. What I've seen is often they'll give you this big long team, and then when you dig in, when you actually do the interview in real time, you'll discover that most of those people are part-time. They're not really on the team. So to me, it's really important to figure out who the team actually is. Is the person who says they're the CEO, are they 100% working on this company? Is the person who they say is co-founder? Do they have another job and this is just something that they added in, right, just to help this other co-founder, make it look like they have a team? Are there holes in the team? Like there's all sorts of things that can go wrong with teams. It's really important that there really is a team behind this. And then again, there's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong with financials. So there's a little picture here. This is a real picture from a real company, one of mine that I actually invested in. And we couldn't find any pattern that made this look like it was going up. Like this is just noisy, right? This is months or quarters or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But this doesn't look good. You want the financials to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And when they're noisy, that's a yellow flag. If the company's I'll get applications for companies that are like 7 years old, and they'll go, we're doing 10,000 in revenue, and we expect to do 100,000 this year. And I go, but you're 7 years old. What's going to happen this year didn't happen the last 7 years. So we can see flaws like that in their financials, or we can see the total opposite of that, which is I was at an angel group here in Seattle once, and the guy gets up on stage. He made it through screening. He gets up on stage. He's pitching his company. They have an interesting looking product, and he's like, "Okay, well, we did 100,000 in revenue this year, and next year we're going to do $20 million." And that's a red flag. You have no idea what it takes to grow a company. No company has ever grown that fast. Like no company with a physical product can grow that fast. You don't have the money. Like, and then the next line is we want $500,000 of ask. You can't grow a $20 million company in $500,000. The numbers just don't work out. So, I don't know how they made it through screening. All right, so that's kind of the basics. Let's talk about success stories. So you go first, Eric.
Right. So one of my successful investments, well, are still on the way, every day getting successful, is FinAccess in Kenya. So FinAccess is an online lending platform, essentially in Kenya and across Africa, and I guess in a lot of the developing world. There's a very strong savings and lending culture. In Kenya, they call them SACCOs. In Ghana, we call them SUSU. In South Africa, Stokvels. So what FinAccess does is basically built an online system to formalize that informal lending culture. So we have a system that onboards the SACCOs, which is the associations, and basically a platform then basically creates a credit history. We call it debit history on their members. And then the platform allows them to lend. And then the businesses that they lend to, we give them a software that runs the business. I invested in this company in Kenya 3 years ago, and last year we hit $2 million in revenue, and this year we're on track to hit $5 million. We've just hired a strong senior management team, and actually we have grown the team now to have 3 of the senior managers female, and then the CEO and the CTO is male. So we have a predominantly female senior management team. And the plan is to capture significant market share in Kenya and East Africa this year. So this is one of my successful investments.
This is great. And just be clear, sometimes deals get done word of mouth. You should acquire my version of this in Uganda. Because I invested in a company just like this in Uganda that's not on this screen because it's not a big success.
All right, let's talk about that, Luni. That'll be great. We're going into Uganda. Actually, it's one of the markets.
Well, you can start with people on the ground and already know Uganda with customers. All right, but my success that I put up here is my very first investment in a native African company. So I could put Burn Manufacturing up here, which is a big success in Kenya, but that's an expat, and I don't want to add to the pile on of expats. East Africa Fruit's the first native African company we invested in 2014. It is a fruit and vegetable aggregator. It has always been the largest fruit and vegetable aggregator in Tanzania, even from year one, because there just wasn't one yet. When we met the entrepreneur, he had just finished year one. Year one was $100,000 in revenue. And what really caught my eye about this company, which by the way, Eric, I found on VC for Africa when it was new.
Wow. Okay.
But cool. What really caught my eye in the interview process and whatnot was that he had earned $100,000 in revenue, but he had only invested $4,000 in the company. And I love capital efficient companies. So I got a 24-year-old entrepreneur who knows how to make things happen. We would call this guy a hustler in the positive version of that term. Could make sales happen. We invested a tiny bit of money. Back then, that's all we did was invest a tiny bit of money, and we didn't have any follow-on capital. Now we do. So I had a group of angels here in Seattle lend him $50,000. And so I think we invested 17 back then. We now do 20 as our first check. So with $67,000, 3 years later, this company did $1 million in revenues. So that's not normal. Just be clear. It happens. We've had others do it too, but it's just not normal. It usually takes $1 million to earn $1 million or $2 million to grow to $2 million. Last year they did 3.2. And they have gotten a bunch of investments. There was a Goodwill, somebody works for Goodwill on the warm up. That's a co-investor of ours in East Africa Fruits. This company is great. I was visiting them. I did visit them in September of 2019. There's a video online where I did a walkthrough of their facility. At the time, they had 1 collection truck and 7 delivery trucks. I talked to the founder a week or 2 ago, and now it's like it's the other way. It's like seven pickup trucks, 7 trucks that go and pick up fruits and vegetables around the whole country, and 20 something delivery trucks. And now we need twice as much because they're going to grow twice as big. So in terms of success stories, just like Eric's, not success as in we've made a ton of money back yet, but success is in it's on the right track. It survived. They both survived pandemics.
Right.
They'll succeed and get much bigger. And I'm hoping to see East Africa Fruit a public company in 2 years. That's my.
By the way, the other reason that I invested in Finaxis was that they were also revenue positive before I went in at a very early stage. So for me, that was also a very good signal, Luni, as you said, with East Africa Fruits.
Oh, we had slides for these guys. Okay, we'll do that for the next one. Here's the one truck they had, the one reefer truck. Now there's a fleet.
And Luni,
Okay,
if you
let's
just
talk
go
about
back,
failure.
Luni, if you just go back one to that, I just want to make a point on that. On next one, one step back.
Okay.
So this picture also I wanted to show because this is our team going out there and onboarding people. So most of the time, the Finaxis team is really guerrilla. They're actually getting people who are offline and showing them how to use the app and sort of onboarding them to the platform. And this is where success actually starts. A team that can go out there and convince people and bring them online.
Okay. I would say one more thing on this. I just love the fact that there is absolutely no invention in this company. It's a fruit
Right.
and vegetable aggregator, processor, distributor. The technology is a building and some trucks. And I am super proud of what everyone would call an SME and dismisses them as too small and too irrelevant. Well, this one just did $3 million in business and grew the incomes of 2,000 farmers in the process. Like everything everyone talks about in food and ag, they're doing it. But let's talk about failure. Let's not just talk about success. And this time we got some pictures.
Right. So Clark Impression was one of my companies that failed, and this is a classic example of an extreme focus on technology. So this company started as trying to monetize social media, and they built some really cool technology. Nice dashboard, ability to show the social media dynamics and all this stuff. But monetizing was very tough. And interestingly, it was a team of 4 people. And then sort of one of the founders left. So there was a team of 3, and all of them were really tech centric. So what I learned from this experience is that today social media monetizing is a big industry. Part of it also was that they're a little bit ahead of the curve, but they really did not have the ability to monetize what they had built and be able to get to market. And that is why this company failed. So it's one of my big learning from this failure. And by the way, one of the things about failure, which is important, is that it's also a learning process for you, the investor. And I also tell the entrepreneurs it's a learning process for you. So at least you know how this didn't work. So hopefully your next venture will work. And so most of the time when you fail, consider that you paid school fees to learn something. And that is the compensation when a business fails. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and speaking of that, right, my very first startup was my biggest failure, and it was cheaper than an MBA. Maybe it was about the same as an MBA. I don't have an MBA. I just have a whole series of companies. Anyway, so my failure story I want to share is Juabar. I made this investment the same exact day I made the one on East Africa Fruits. Also happens to be Tanzania. This one was 2 women, expat Americans doing business in Tanzania, already up and running, already with revenue. The business in Tanzania was profitable, but if you added in their costs, it wasn't. That's one flaw to look out for. Expats cost a lot of money, right? Native Africans do not. Expats have to fly back and forth and whatnot, especially the ones that aren't living over there. So this company is or was solar powered phone recharging. So the pitch was really simple. I don't think I put it in there. The pitch is really simple. Basically, every adult in Tanzania has a cell phone, and the electric grid is not everywhere. So let's charge them with cell phones. This was years before the pay-go solar home systems and the affordable solar lanterns and whatnot. So it was a really good idea. I think it's still a good idea. And the flaw
So,
that
Luni, do
happened
you think
was
they failed because they were ahead of the curve? What was the
no.
reason they failed?
Here's why they flawed. Two reasons. One or three reasons. One, the solar charger. As we rolled out more of these boxes, these kiosks were in towns off of the paved road, so not easy to get to villages.
Okay.
We had a piece of equipment fail on us, so the actual box that charges up the battery failed. We had to go and replace all that and go do it in these distant villages. That cost a lot of money.
That cost, yeah.
Flaw two is it was two women, and I love investing in women, but the problem is that they don't get any investors. And so because there was a dip, because the financials went down, the odds of them getting more money went to zero. They got no more money. And flaw number three, expats can go home. So if they were native Tanzanians, this company would still be in business somehow, but they weren't. They were from California, so they went home. And nobody was left to run the business. It got shut down. So this is the last time I ever invested in an expat company, and I don't plan on doing it again. And that's not the normal trend. Everybody
Luni,
else.
Joe mentioned ARID in Rwanda. Yes, I know about ARID. Luni, do you know about ARID?
Which
in
one?
Rwanda?
No, actually, I haven't seen another one of these. The closest thing was a solar kiosk in East Africa.
I've heard about ARID, but I haven't met them yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I see. There's a whole bunch of failures in my portfolio where I still like the business. If I found an entrepreneur who liked the business too, I would I would broker the IP and get the thing running again.
Luni, Joe makes an important point. Joe, you're right that doing it just solar charging is not enough revenue. So the model that works nowadays, putting it in a local community shop that does other things, selling airtime, so it's got to be multiple revenue sources for it to work.
The solar system for the Duca so that it can charge the phones. But these guys were going down a different path. There was actually a really nice add-on to this because these were franchises. So they'd find the entrepreneur in the village who wanted to run the business. They would give them the kiosk for some small upfront fee, and then they would charge them per month. And eventually they could buy it out. But because they had that path to all these villages, Unilever said, okay, we want access to all those people. Exactly. Will you sell our soap for your channel? And so we were on our way to we were just testing it out, but we were selling airtime and we were about to sell soap. And then we were about to be the Netflix of rural Tanzania too, because we figured out the battery was big enough that we could run a TV. So we would have a solar powered TV and we would distribute some form of a video out to these villages. And this is long enough ago that the cell phone systems couldn't do this. And so we could just run a showing of a movie in a village and people would pay a fee for it. And so they had a bunch of ideas for other ways to add on to this. And we didn't get to do it because we ran out of money fixing the equipment.
Right. Luni, Tanushri raised an important point on the point of being ahead of the curve, that entrepreneurs have failed because of that. How do we feel as an investor? You want to take that first and I'll make follow you?
Yeah, there's a great analysis. There's a TED talk from a few years ago from the creator of Idea Lab. And he looked at 200 companies to determine why some of them failed and some of them succeeded.
Is it a David Ross TED talk?
Yeah, I could go find the next time you're talking, I'll go search for the URL. Except we're sharing my screen here. And I think it's Bill Gross from Idea Lab TED talk.
Yeah, David Ross. Yeah.
No, not David Ross. I think it's Bill Gross.
Okay.
And what he found was number one by far, like almost half of half of what made things succeed was timing. You got to get the timing right. And I taught this to my angels in the Angel Accelerator, and I showed them Friendster. Right? Clear cases, Friendster versus Facebook. Friendster was just a little bit too soon. Facebook was exactly on time. That's why it took off. WeWork is a great example here in the States. They timed co-working just perfectly. They just never wrote a business plan. That's why they ultimately failed, right? And then a pandemic hit. East Africa Fruits, I don't know. Their timing. I use them as a counterexample because that business could have got started in 1986 in Tanzania, right? As soon as the socialism went away and you could own your own business in Tanzania, that business could have been started before Ellie was even born, but it wasn't. And so there was nothing magic about the year he started it. So yes, timing is really useful. It's usually the biggest factor, but not always. I can do this with my own businesses too. My very first startup, the reason it failed was we were writing software for tablet computers. That sounds great, right? But we were doing it in 1992, 1993. And the iPad came out in 2010. The iPhone came out in 2007. So we were 15 years ahead of the curve. We had the right idea. We had it in the wrong decade. We ran out of money.
Yeah, Tanushree, you're right. Sometimes second mover advantage, the second guy gets it right, and the first guy paid the price for being too far ahead. So sometimes it helps to back the second jockey, not the first jockey.
Yeah, and that's Microsoft's secret. Like, I'm here in Seattle. One of the huge successes is Microsoft. They were never first at anything.
Right.
Ever. They weren't the first OS. They weren't the first word processor. You can say the same thing. Apple was the first home computer that was nice to use, but it wasn't the first home computer. It wasn't the first music player. It wasn't the first smartphone. It wasn't the first tablet. Like, Apple never did anything first. They just saw the market and figured out where the sweet spot was. And so we can do African examples too, but those are the easier ones for my American brain to do at midnight. So let's talk about one we don't know. Let's go. We had a success story, we had a failure story, and now we're in the middle of the investment and we don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with Africa Data School, which is a company that we're looking at, and essentially has a very interesting model of training, data scientists and machine learning experts online. And they reached out to me out of the blue, and they already had revenue. And this started last year, so out of COVID. And the three founders, they have two startups. The first two startups have failed. The second one was a potential acquisition that got hit by COVID. And during that time, they had started this meeting of their community, and then they realized that they should take it online, and that's how they started Africa Data School. So I've not invested in it yet, but it's a company I'm looking at investing in. Two important things: the fact that they already got revenue without a lot of technology. Though in their previous venture, they built some great technology and it didn't work. So it looks like they've learned something. Number two is the fact that they essentially are leveraging, the situation with COVID. And we have another portfolio company, eCampus, which is in the space. So I see some complementarities between the two companies. They are in Kenya. This company is in Ghana. So that's the reason we're looking at it. And most likely we'll do an investment soon this year, hopefully.
Okay, I'm going totally different path. So that Eric's talking about one he hasn't even picked yet. I've been in this company for 6 or 7 years. It's called Obama Stove. It was started by Yusuf here. And when I met Yusuf in 14 or so, he was a taxi driver here in Seattle. He was an Ethiopian refugee, came to the States as a teenager, doesn't even know how old he is. And then he went back and accidentally started a cook stove company with his brother. It was at the time the biggest cook stove company on the continent. It was the biggest for years. It got started on no money. I love capital efficiency. So a taxi driver's money, no grants, no investments, no debt, no nothing. Just a taxi driver having an idea with no background on cook stoves. They had sold 200,000 of these when I met him, 220,000 when I met him. And he didn't think he was going to get into the accelerator, so he never even finished the application. But lucky for him, I can see the applications when they're partially filled out. It's one of my secrets. I liked it, and I interviewed him and invited him in, and he was just flabbergasted at that. And here we are 6-7 years later. This company survived all that crazy unrest in Ethiopia that was centered on the town where we're based. His brother got disappeared by the old government. That we survived that. His brother survived that too, thank God. There's a pandemic going on. If you guys haven't seen it, that's not good for business. So we don't know where this is going, but we know that we've made 400 and something thousand stoves now, and we're still in business and we're still going. And we're hoping it's going to get to, a million stoves a year someday. Ethiopia doesn't make this easy. Ethiopia is, as far as I've seen, the hardest place to do business on the continent, but hopefully there's some worse places out there. I guess hopefully. It's just a really hard place for foreigners to come in and bring in capital. And the unrest and all the rest of it just makes it so that nobody wants to put in capital there. And then what we're doing for this one to try and get it to the next step is we'll announce Obama Stove Kenya in a few months. We're going to replicate it in Kenya because, of course, Obama was not Ethiopian. Mr. Obama was Kenyan. And if we can make it work in Kenya, we're going to go do Obama Stove Uganda after that. And then we'll go do Obama stoves in the rest of the continent. It's the only cook stove company that does artisanal stoves at scale. It's awesome. And I hope it succeeds, but I can't tell you it's going to succeed. All right, one last one. I think this is the last part before we just open up to total questions. So why'd you invest in Save App?
So I invested in Save App because the founder, Aziz Omar here, I knew him from his previous company. He has a very interesting background. He worked in government and in NGO. He was in NGO and then NGO world and then moved to government. And then whilst he was in government, he has a very unusual experience, and that led him to leave government and start the first postal company using your phone number called M-Post in Kenya. So essentially, his first company allows you to turn your phone number in Kenya into a postal address. And so if you send a mail to that address, it gets to Kenya, it triggers an SMS to your phone. And then you can either go to the post office and pick it up, or you can have it delivered to you. And grew that company very quickly to build a partnership with Safaricom. So now Safaricom M-Pesa users have that option with a click of a button. And then he came to me and during COVID and said, I have this new idea to do this very simple thing, like running up people's savings and people's change and then saving it. And I thought that was a great idea in a sense that, in the COVID time, everybody's looking to save. And in Kenya, savings is a big culture, right? So if you can run up your change from all your purchases, and by click of an SMS, you can run that app and save it and either redeem it through some voucher or save it, put into a pension program. I thought that was interesting. So it was one of two investments I made last year. And we just launched the app, and it's already got a lot of traction. So it's a very simple idea. And Salio in Swahili means save.
Okay. Mine is Kalahari Honey, which is not the most recent, but I just love this story. This is Mavis. She's from Botswana. She applied to my accelerator 5 times. She got turned down 5 times. She eventually got invited into the Land Accelerator, which is a partner program in Nairobi. And she got invited in doing a company that had nothing to do with honey. And a month before she gets flown into Nairobi for that program, she emails me and says, I got a problem. I have this little nonprofit on the side and we do honey. And we got a big order from a chemist, from a pharmacy. What should I do? And I said, fill the order. And then she's like, well, I need money to fill the order and whatnot. So we talked about that and we got our investment for that. And the pitch for this company has actually nothing to do with honey at the beginning. The pitch is that there are more elephants in Botswana than any other country in Africa. And if you put bees on the farm, the elephants stay away. So it saves elephants literally by just being a beekeeper, and it makes income for the farmers and all that. And these beehives that she has, this is a great example of where the government or an NGO or somebody, put out hundreds of beehives years and years ago around the country They handed into the farmers. Nothing happened. So she and her little nonprofit decided to teach the women how to be beekeepers, redistributed the beehives to women farmers, and they're the ones who make the honey. So it's hundreds and hundreds of farmers. And this company is on my list for favorites at the moment because every 2 months I get a new email from her saying, I just got another big order. What should I do? And my answer is fill it. But the problem is now that the orders are getting to be humongous, where we'll get a $75,000 order and we need to go buy $50,000 worth of honey tomorrow to fill it. And then when this happens month after month after month, or every quarter after quarter after quarter, we keep pumping money into this company just to fulfill the orders. So this is another one where it should be $1 million a year company, million something this year, with way less than $1 million invested. All right, so just to finish up here, what can growth look like in African companies? This is my brand new chart from Africa Eats. This is our 27 companies and how they've grown in the last 6 years, 7 years. And so here's East Africa Fruits. When we met them, it was 100 grand. This year was 3.3 million. Next on, I'm not going to go through all these, but next on the list was Rogathe Dairy in Tanzania. It was a $130,000 company in 2019. Another one of these guys. We found some angels to fill in a need in the middle of last year, in the middle of the pandemic, with everything going wrong. And they did like $1.2 million last year. $50,000 in, $60,000 in, and $1 million of revenues. And the same thing happened with Obri Tanzania a few years ago, and then the pandemic knocked it back down. We keep finding these opportunities where the companies can get from proof of concept, proof of this business works, to over $1 million a year in business in a year or 2 or 3. And we're excited that all of these companies can do that, given the right money at the right time to the right team and so on. So we think this growth is definitely possible with hundreds of companies, not just the ones we're finding.
Before I go to my final slide, Luni, there's a question in here from Jacqueline about comparing Obama stove model to Ben stoves in Kenya. Do you want to be thinking about it and respond later, or do you want to respond before I go to my final slide?
Oh, I'll respond to that, because burn manufacturing was in my very first session of Fledge. So I know them too. They're from Seattle originally, expats. They've sold 1 million stoves. I still remember when they passed up Obama stove, because we know each other. We've been in the same room together and chat. They're very two different paths. I say this is two perfect examples of the two paths of building a business. The burn path, literally that's what we call it, even as burn manufacturers, the burn path and the earn path. So the burn path was when they came through Fledge, they had nothing. They had no revenues, no product, no factory, no nothing. And they wanted to raise $5 million. And Peter's amazing at raising money. And so he did. In fact, he's raised like $15 million. And it took 6 or 7 before they got to big and profitable. And Yusuf was a taxi driver. And so he probably brought a few $100s with him to Ethiopia, and that's it. That was the earn path. So they were earning money all by themselves before we wrote them any check. And again, our checks are small. And so when you put the 2 stoves in a testing facility and check to see which one's better, the burn stove is slightly better. But you have to understand that they got hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants to do research on that stove. When I met them, they were running a nonprofit that was actually a stove design company as a nonprofit. Yusuf has never been in a lab, except Burns Lab as a visitor. He's never put his stove in a lab until we were asked to do that by a grantor. First time we ever saw the stats, lo and behold, they're almost identical. Just shows it's not that hard to design a stove, or not hard. Anyway. And then the last thing I'll say on this is, because of the 2 paths, years ago, I could see the numbers from the 2 companies, and the cost of capital at burn, right? So they got capital to grow their company, and there was a mix of debt and equity. The cost of capital per stove, you took the amount of money they had raised in debt, the amount of money they were paying in servicing their debt, divided by the number of stoves they were making. That was a higher price than we sell the Obama stoves for. So this is why the burn stoves are $38 a piece or so, or hopefully they're a little cheaper now. and the Obama stoves are like $5.50, $5.25. It's because we don't have any capital cost at the Obama path. There's no machines at Obama stove. It's just hammers and tin snips. And you can go see a video of the burn manufacturing facility, because I did that. That's posted online too. It's all machines. It's welding machines and power. The burn stove looks nicer. It's a nicer stove. I have one in my garage. I don't use it, but I have one. It's a really nice stove. It's something to show off. And the Obama stove is ugly, but they do the same job, and they do it for 1/8 the price. So there's markets for both of them. They're both doing great. I want both of them to succeed. I'm just a slightly bigger fan of the earn path than the burn path.
Anyway, so I wanted to do my last slide, or instead of talking about the sort of numbers of my companies, as Luni did, I thought I would say something a little bit different to sort of on the impact side. So what does investing in technology or the ICT sector, how does it contribute? So how is it contributing to economic growth in Africa? So I wanted to sort of give you the bigger impact and how we measure impact. So we measure impact from economic development point of view. So these are two important anecdotes. So Ghana and Kenya, and this is from a 2019 report that Bloomberg did, that concluded that in Ghana, the ICT sector contributed 239% to GDP growth in Ghana. And in Kenya, it was about 57%, number 2 to construction. Just about 5 years ago, ICT had no contribution at all to economic development. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you see more and more that the ICT sector is going to be a big contributor to economic growth. As a matter of fact, the World Bank and the Google, if you just launched a study that said that in the next decade, the contribution of the mobile sector to GDP growth is going to be between 10 to 25%. So for me, this is what excites me about investing, because I'm really going to make returns, but also contributing to the development of African economies. And these are two classic examples. So on that, I think we can take some more questions. I think we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, I love the irony of the impact investor talks about the finances, and the finance
Exactly.
talks about the impact. We both care about impact.
Exactly.
I just have it embedded in all of my companies where we just don't have to think about it. We fight hunger and poverty, and we do it by selling food and cook stoves. And
I mean, also that, to be fair, the way we see it is that, look, when you invest in Africa, except in the same industries, you make impact. People in the same industry can tell you they make some impact, right? But so impact is a question of what you want to measure, right? What lens you want to wear, measuring jobs is impact, economic development, empowering women, etc. So impact is broad, and you have to define what you want to measure or what you care about.
Yeah. Okay. So we got 15 minutes left. Feel free to throw questions in the chat window, and feel free to come off of mute and just ask us.
Actually, come off mute. It'll be good to hear some new voices. I think Luni and I have listened to each other enough. So
that too. I just don't like that. I don't like that.
It's Tony Gannon here from Dublin, Ireland. Luni, Eric, thanks for your time there today. I'm interested. Sometimes people describe one of the difficulties is getting exits in Africa, that there's so few exits. And I heard you talking about, obviously, stock exchange development and stuff like that. So it's really hard to attract money in if you can't get an exit. Could you talk to me about exits, what they're like on the ground? How many have there been? And I presume it's going to get better. I suppose that's my question.
Yeah, Eric, take it.
Yeah, so good question, Tony. And exits have been a challenge, but also that the issue of exits has to do with the maturity of the market, right? So in this op-ed that I'm going to, I'm putting in here that I wrote in January, I actually said this next decade in Africa is going to be the decade of exits. And I'll give you some anecdotal evidence. First of all, the industry has come into, depending on how you look at its first decade or its second decade. So the first and second generation entrepreneurs have all gotten to the point where now these companies are big enough. So for example, last year, Paystack was acquired by Stripe. And the reason Stripe acquired Paystack, and Paystack is a Nigerian startup that started in 2015, just 5 years ago. And the early investors in Paystack within this acquisition made, can somebody just take, Tony, can you take a wild guess what their return multiple was in 5 years from that acquisition? Just give me your wild guess.
The multiple, I suppose a 10x or something, but it's obviously much more than that.
Right. It was about 40x.
Wow.
The early investors in Iroko TV. So I just sent a link in the chat, this blog post. That's the blog post I wrote, the numbers are there. The early investors in Iroko TV made 1,140% return in 5 years. So 2 points, yes, Africa represents a certain risk profile, but the returns are high. In terms of timing of exit, I think the market is getting there now. You're going to see in this decade more and more exits. So the more exits question is going to be answered because the market has matured and more companies are going to go public or are going to go into a strategic acquisition. So this is the right time to start looking at investing. Obviously, as exit comes, it means that the market gets more expensive, the price of deals go up. So you got to keep that in mind as well.
All right, I'm going to give a different answer, of course. So I'm in food and ag in most of my things in Africa. I don't know of any exits in food and ag. There probably have been, but I've seen zero. And so I just don't wait for those. I'm impatient. Patient capital investor, totally impatient for the structure. So I either invest using revenue-based schemes or this new method, which is permanent capital, take the thing public, and I don't have to exit any of my companies. The investors can exit whenever they feel like. George had a question.
By the way, just let me add as well. One of the exits that I mentioned in the Roku TV deal was a secondary sale. So there's also an option to do secondary for the secondaries. The secondaries market is now developing. Probably that deal and a few others were 2 or 3. So the secondaries market is also developing where you can actually exit. So you don't have to wait for sort of a liquidity event to make your return. Sorry, go ahead, Luni. You're going. There was a question that came up from
George. Ask us. Come off of mute and ask us the crazy question.
Yeah, George. Yeah, George. Actually, we need to hear your voice. Come on, George.
Luni, hi, Eric. Fantastic presentation as always. I mean, the question for me would be if you had to maybe point out one problem that you've seen that's not been addressed, and where there's crazy potential for someone who's interested in becoming an entrepreneur, what would you tell them to go into? Hopefully, Luni, not a very broad answer like hunger or poverty. Like, one bang on thing that you can say, go out and do this. What would that be?
But my answer is hunger, and my answer is hunger. So not everybody eats every meal they want. Almost half of the food grown in Africa never gets to a plate. 30% of grains and 45% of fruits and vegetables. Those are solvable problems. We know how to solve them. The problem is lack of capital. Personally, I've been sitting in for 2 days on these talks where the NGOs and the governments are talking about increasing yields and whatnot. And I'm sitting there in the chat window. I don't know if you were in the last one last night, just saying like, you guys are doing it wrong. I really just want to yell. You guys are doing it wrong. Let's go invest in the companies that buy from farmers. So please just give me some money so I can go invest more in companies and just copy what I'm doing. Like there are plenty of companies out there. You don't have to just give me the money to do it. That will solve the problem. And I just want to point out, like we didn't have a whole pile of NGOs in the United States in 1880 solving poverty in the United States. We had huge poverty problems until the 30s and 40s. We solved the problem because we were companies like General Mills and Procter and Gamble and whatnot that bought food from farmers and consolidated into bigger and bigger farms. That's how America became rich. That's how Europeans got rich. We just need to do the same thing again. We just need, $100 billion, $500 billion in agriculture in Africa.
Luni, as well, can I ask a question about the amount of work?
Claire, before you ask your question, Claire, just if you may, just I think Joe had a response.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You might just allowing Joe to speak. Joe, can you
Yeah,
come
yeah.
up and respond to George, and then we go to you, Claire.
Thank you, Eric. So my response was supply chains, which is I think the same response as Luni. So if you look at a company like Kasha, which is active in Rwanda and Kenya, all they've done, with respect to the founders, it's a great business, but all they're doing is setting up a more sophisticated supply chain to sell personal hygiene products, for example. So that they're copying a model that already exists in other markets. They're working with manufacturers like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson to deliver products. So I'm also looking at a business doing supply chain in the medical sector as well, because people die in hospitals because they cannot get products that exist. It's ridiculous. People are dying in hospitals, and yet this stuff is there, but there's no inventory management, for example. So this company provides free inventory management software to the clinics and hospitals. And then the founder of the company, they just make the supply chain a bit more efficient. So my advice is really look at supply chains, and you don't need to do something massively innovative. You need to, we use the word in East Africa Investments, copy with pride. Look at how it's done in other countries, other continents, and make a version that's suitable for East Africa.
Yeah, the problem is that the investors want something innovative and flashy. They want an app that's cloud-based on a blockchain doing AI.
Yeah, we go to Claire. Claire, you have the floor now.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, my question was, we'll say, how much work do you have to put into these companies? And then does that limit how many companies you can have in your portfolio? And is it a lot of work maybe at the start, and then they need far less work, they're on their own, so is it limiting, or could you, can you have dozens and dozens of portfolio companies?
Well, Luni, I'll start and you can jump in. So generally, when you're investing also, you want to probably have sort of an investment strategy. All of us, Luni, as you can see, we differ a little bit on a few things because we have different strategies, which also means that we have different approaches. But generally, my view is that you have to estimate how much capacity you have as an investor from a capital point of view, from your involvement point of view, and from what you can outsource and what you think that somebody else can do for you. And that is very important. You have to make that assessment first. So for example, when we start growing more, as we invest in more companies, we bring more people. So currently in Chanzo Capital, which is the fund around, there are now 3 additional partners. So we have a partner in South Africa, we have a partner in Kenya, we have a partner in Ghana, and I'm the managing partner, right? So you need to, if you don't take care, you get overwhelmed, Yeah. But also generally, when you early in the life of a company, when you invest, you're a little bit more involved, which is why I kind of said that you also have to be sure that you can be as involved as you want to, or as you can be for it to succeed. Otherwise, you realize that you get into a tough situation vis-a-vis what you can do and what needs to be done and what doesn't happen. And then I also finally think that, investing in something that at an early stage is very important. If ideally it's sort of invest in a sector that you either know, you've worked there before, because it helps you significantly de-risk what you are investing in. So if you don't know technology and you haven't done stuff there, but you want to do, maybe you want to invest with someone who has that experience or has been in industry. Because every industry has unique traits. You think, food is very easy. Oh yeah, food, everybody eats every day. People are hungry. So let me just go invest in food. There are 2 restaurants. One has a queue, the other one, nobody's going there, but it's, it's open. Anyway, Luni.
I haven't found the level where it's too much. I have 100 and something investments, 105, 110, something like that. It depends on where you count the edges of my investments. They all need less help over time as they grow, right? If they succeed. If they fail, they just keep calling you back. They talk to you more when they need more money, and then they talk to you less after you've given them the money. Part of the way I'm able to handle that is first and foremost, I run an accelerator. I have 600 volunteers that all want to help startups. So I don't always have to provide the answers. I can turn to the mentors and say, can one of you guys help this one? Or I don't, to Eric's point, I do invest in things I don't know. I enjoy that. That's the learning is really fun. But when I have a question that's important in a sector I don't know, I don't answer it. I go and find someone in my network that does. And because I run an accelerator, those volunteers just show up. I don't have to go find them. Somebody every month asks to join the network. So
okay, great. And you start small, don't you? Like your initial investment will always be small, will it?
Absolutely.
yeah, ours is always $20,000.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Claire,
You know,
always
20,000. If you lose the $20,000, it's not the end of the world. And after a few months, you know which ones you want to invest more in.
Yeah, great.
And I have a very important theorem that you can take it or leave it, is that only invest money that you can lose. If it's your kids' school fees, don't invest it. So just invest money that you can lose, because there's a high probability that you may lose it. So
Yeah, and just be clear, we're talking about investing here. Eric and I both run funds. We have other people's money that we're managing.
we're managing.
It's not just our money. I'm not some billionaire that's out writing my own checks. I do that too. I do write angel checks, but way more often I'm writing checks using other people's money, treating it like my own. And we're just about out of time. We're supposed to finish in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think Jacqueline and Joe had some questions in there. Jacqueline is asking me the differentiating factor between Save Up and MPOS. I mean, yeah, good question. I think sort of what I like about Aziz is that if you take MPOS, it's a very simple idea, but very powerful. And if you take Save Up also, it's a very simple idea, but very powerful. And what I like about him is his ability to execute. And so there are two different things, but the similarities that they are very, very simple ideas that have very strong impact and can make great returns. And I believe that entrepreneur has the ability to execute on that. So I see some similarities in that sense and what he can execute on, which is why I went in.
Yeah,
and Bobby, Luni, you want to take the last one? So you'll get one more minute.
Yeah, Joe said we need more co-investors because it's hard to handle the burden of sourcing and due diligence and follow-ups and whatnot. That's one thing that did not get copied from the California VCs. There's this doesn't get written about a lot. They only co-invest. You cannot. I think this is becoming less common now. But back when I was a tech investor, you could not get a single check from a single VC. They never did that. They always provided half the money you were asking for and then helped you find a co-investor. Always twos. It's like Sith, always twos. And then when the next round came, there was always a third one that had to join in. So there were always this culture about co-investing, and that does not exist in impact investing. I've not seen it in Africa or Latin America or Asia or anywhere else.
I mean, it's beginning to happen in Africa, Luni. It's as more and more people come on, we'll begin to see that. But yes, it's the way to go.
But what percentage of your last deals had a 50-50 co-investor? FinAccess, we've just done a $2 million deal, which literally we're closing it now, and we had a syndicate that had about 8 investors doing $500K. And then we have a group doing 300. So literally about 5 different investors. Some of them syndicate with about 8 people in it, came together to provide a $2 million. Right,
this
nice.
is for FinAccess for this year. We're literally closing that round this month. We should have closed it last month, but one of the investors delayed a little bit.
I've seen it just once, just at East Africa Fruits, but it was a syndicate. It wasn't a 50-50 deal. It was like 6 investors coming together with one leading. No,
you're right at 50-50 we'll get there, but I'm just saying that there's more and more co-investment happening. I think the co-investment culture is good, and I think that is happening.
I got another one I'm going to send to you as a co-investment.
Okay, cool.
Nigerian company. So,
cool. Next door.
So thanks Sankalp for connecting Eric and I. Thank you everybody for coming today. In the chat window, they said you can keep talking to us, Umbrella. Personally, I'm going to sleep. It's 1:30 in the morning. But I will follow up tomorrow. You can find me on the websites I put in the chat window, and I'm reachable.
Oh, Luni, did you put your email ID in the chat window as well?
I'm not going to do that. But you can find me if you just go to the contact page at Fledge or Africa Eats. That goes straight to my inbox.
Okay.
Yeah, or LinkedIn. You can reach me on LinkedIn or or lots of other places online. Just search for LUNI on Google.
Thanks, Viv.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Luni. It was great.
All right. Have a good one, guys. Bye now.
Thanks,
Bye.
Eric. Bye.